Thank you. We're back, and this is our panel. I'm going to introduce each one of them briefly, and then each one of them is going to take a couple minutes to introduce themselves in more depth and give you sort of a thesis statement about where AI is in their businesses and in their roles that they occupy in the world. We'll start at the far end. Leo Schrantz is the Chief AI and Innovation Officer for Vestmark. Leo, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Toppin is Chief Services Officer for Mainstay Technologies and an incredibly stylish dresser.
Thank you.
And then Steve Leone, we've got the media on this side. He is the publisher of the Concord Monitor and the Vice President of News for Newspapers of New England, one of my alma maters. So Steve, welcome. Thank you. And let's go back to Leo and get started. Leo.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Leo Schrantz, Chief AI and Innovation Officer. So Vestmark, we're a portfolio management, wealth management technology company, been around for 25 years. We have almost $2 trillion in assets that we administer through our platform every day. We have recently been working on artificial intelligence, obviously internally for adoption. So as a software company, we are leveraging a lot of the coding code pilots that are out there, Claude Code, the Cursors of the world. We have a lot of AI that we're implementing that sit on top of our company's internal systems to help our employees get better information, do better research to understand our company. Obviously, we've been around for 25 years, so we've got a lot of that internal knowledge we've got to manage. And then most excitingly, we've built our own AI agent that we're calling our advisor assistant that sits inside of portions of our platform to help financial advisors navigate the system and help them deliver better advice for their end clients. And I think, for us, when we're talking about ethics, one of the things that we are constantly discussing is this idea of discretion and human in the loop. That's the biggest element of our design system is where are we okay with AI making certain decisions on behalf of the user, and where do we really need to pull that advisor into the process to authorize things explicitly and drive things forward. And it's a balance and trade-off between that efficiency and decision making. That's a big thing we think about every day. And I think that's, when it comes to the ethics of AI, one of the things that we talk a lot about. So I don't know if that covers my thesis statement for today, but that's what we think about.
Well done. Thank you. Chris.
Yes, Chris Toppin, Chief Services Officer at Mainstay Technologies. What Mainstay does is we are an IT services provider for businesses around New Hampshire and beyond. So we have a couple hundred businesses. We provide IT infrastructure services, so typical, workstation servers, network devices, and cybersecurity services. And now this year, AI consulting. And what that looks like is sitting down with businesses, helping them get set up on a secure AI platform, training their team on how to use those systems, and helping them write policies so that they have guidance for their team on how to use them safely. One thing that I will disclose my use of AI is I have a project in ChatGPT with pictures of my blazers, and I ask it what pairings and matchings go with green shoes and green glasses. So
you are probably not the only one that asks it for style advice. I'm going to confess, I occasionally take a picture and say this, and it comes back. And having read every style blog in the universe says, not that.
Yeah.
Steve.
Wow, I've already learned a lot. I'm gonna use that.
Too much.
Steve Leone, publisher of the Concord Monitor. So the Monitor has been around since 1864. So that was a year before the end of the Civil War. And within my company, Newspapers of New England, it actually makes us kind of young. We have one publication that was 1786. So that was 3 years old, and the U.S. is 3 years old. So if you're keeping score, so it's a pretty long time we've been around, and we've been able to adapt to things like steam power and electricity and computers and the internet and now AI. And in some ways, AI seems about as big and maybe even bigger than all of those. So we are using AI. We're using AI to combat kind of probably the biggest issue we've had in the last 20 years has been the number of journalists. And we can talk about that because I think that's a great intersection with AI is it returns some of our capability back to us, which is critical. But the paradox is we need to apply that new capacity with a high level of ethics and transparency because Trust of local news, you know, local news does better than national news. I'll let you know that. Local news is far better than national news, but we're still wrapped up in that. And we need to be transparent in our use of AI at every step. So that's going to be a tall task for the months, years, and decades ahead.
It is very challenging. So, and I think I heard there was a thread in something each of you said that leads back to something that Cam talked about, which is policies. How do you set policy? Who's involved in setting that? And how often does it change as things continue to accelerate? And throw it open to whoever wants to jump in first.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, I mean, if you're not updating policies at least annually, then especially with AI now, you're going to fall behind and not keep up with some of the newest features that are coming out. Our policies that we advise clients on vary from being just use the approved tools or use nothing to here are the grades of types of sensitive data that you have, and here are the tools that you can use for those types of sensitivity. So it all depends on how complex the organization wants to get. Some organizations do want some leeway to use public data in public tools. So we have to kind of account for that and put other controls and policies around it.
Yeah, I'll build off that. We have our own, AI governance committee that we've set up internally. It consists of myself, our general counsel, product engineering, sales, because we want their feedback too on what, customers are asking for out there. I kind of like the framework Cam had. It's very similar to what we have of, there's approved, there's high risk, and there's prohibited. We want everyone in the organization to feel comfortable using AI, right? And so providing every employee with, tools that are approved and use cases that are improved helps actually drive adoption in positive ways. So it's important to start with, these are the things, not just that you can do, but that we want you to do, tools we want you to use. And then also give them very strict rules about, like, look, it's never okay to put our client's data in AI. So if you're not doing that and you're using another tool, you're generally good, right? Like we would love to hear what it is that you want to use AI for, right, across the company and the organization, but give them clear, like, this is clearly out of bounds. These tools are approved for just about anything you'd want to do. Going from there, like, seems to be pretty good. And then from an external perspective, that's where the high risk things come into place. Like when there's people making decisions that aren't directly in our control, the external users, how do we want to manage those aspects? That's when we really start to invest more in crafting policies and tools and procedures in that sort of area. So that's been our approach at Vestmark.
Yeah, and for us, our company, we have 10 websites, and each of the websites has AI policy down at the bottom. So we make that very transparent. We have an internal AI policy that's also more detailed and probably more evolving. But, I actually feel pretty good after watching the keynote that we're doing pretty much everything in there. We haven't gotten to reassessment yet, and I think that's going to be key. Because we do need to have this thing evolve. But yeah, for us, our policy is just being honest with people consistently. If we ever do any reporting projects that use AI in ways that you wouldn't expect, we'd probably let people know specific to that. I'm writing about it. We do a year-end report to readers, kind of like an impact report. I'll be writing something about our AI use and how we approach it, but it's very much, human sandwich is kind of the way we frame it. It's a human on both sides, and you have AI kind of do what it does, but you verify and you guide it to, the finish point.
So digging a little deeper into the policy question, one of the challenges it feels like to me, and I think we've explored this in our organization as we developed our policies, and in the beginning, a lot of those policies were around what we're going to do with AI from a generative AI, journalism, or design perspective, right? But that's not taking into account this whole use set for like back office stuff and sales and marketing and all of the other pieces. If we had taken a policy approach where it was like top down, nobody do this until we tell you it's okay, we don't always know what individual operators within the organization who have specific expertises could actually use it for. Like, what are the problems they're trying to solve? How do you dig those out and create efficiencies when you might not even know what those problems are at sort of the executive level?
Yeah, I think what Leo was talking about, the governance committee is really key, a cross-functional, cross-team governance committee with folks that you think will be champions and help push forward AI initiatives and be open to what's possible, because you don't have that perspective and feedback just, deciding at the leadership or executive level. You need to have your other teams involved in collaborating on what tools to look at.
Yeah, and I think there's, experimentation and innovation, I think is key to any good organization. For us, we publish, so that's a different animal, right? We don't ever want to publish anything that we have questions about. But you need experimentation, and what you mentioned as far as advertising, I mean, it is an example of it. It wasn't anything that we set out to do, but AI can help you learn scripts and get that first pass. The hardest thing for anyone selling advertising is a cold call. It's just a kind of an unnatural, challenging experience, and you get information back, and you start getting a little bit better at getting to the root cause and solving problems. And I think that's a case where it's just making people better at their job, more capable. And it has nothing to do with publishing anything. So there's a lot of safe ground in there. If you have, I don't want to call it a wild west approach, but less limitations short of publishing content.
I think one of the most powerful things about AI that I'm really excited about, especially in software and software development, is your users ask the AI for stuff, and you get to see that, right? And so one of the biggest drivers that we're trying to push, our clients to adopt this advisor assistant isn't that like I'm just going to show up and do everything you want, but I'm going to be able to see as the software developer what users are asking this AI to do. And when it can't do it, it steers our product roadmap in certain directions, right? That's both true internally and from an external perspective. And so the ability to have a user ask our AI assistant to, hey, can you help me with a withdrawal request? Well, right now I can't, but I just logged that request that I got from that user on the back end, and it steers our direction, different direction to build that capability. Whereas before, and if anybody's worked in software development, you build an application and then you just watch to see if people, click the buttons and actually use the thing. And when they don't, it's like, okay, now we got to reach out, we got to have surveys, or we got to sit down and do demos and understand and get that feedback. We're getting all that feedback in AI in real time. It's really powerful and really advantageous. And so to answer that question, how do you figure out what it is that people want to use it for? To get it out there and watch what people are asking it to do, and then monitor and adjust accordingly to make it more useful for the end users.
So following up on that, you mentioned in your opening comments building an AI agent, and there may be some of us here who are like, well, okay, how do you do that? What are you using to build that AI agent? What's the technology? Where do you get it? Because I think a lot of people, your first thought is, oh, well, ChatGPT or maybe the AI that underlies photo recognition software or something like that. But how did you approach it? What's the AI agent?
Yeah, so I'll define the agentic AI, at least the way that I would define it, and I'm sure there's different definitions out there, but you start with a large language model that we're all familiar with. If you're curious, in our tech stack, we primarily use Claude's family of models. We find them to be pretty consistent in their actions decision making, but there's other ones out there, ChatGPTs and other things that you could use. You add in tools, right? So that's the APIs and database systems that might exist within your particular software. And then leveraging, there's various frameworks, but a popular one is like chain of thought type of reasoning. You're leveraging the power of the large language model to essentially write its own set of instructions and then call those tools in order to get the information or make the actions necessary to complete the task that the user's giving it. So what's that look like? In our system, it might be, hey, I have a client, there's a proposal that already exists in our system. I originally wrote it for $250,000 of cash investment. I want to increase that to $500,000. Can you help me with that AI assistant, right? So it says, sure. And what it does is it says, to do that, I need to call the API that adjusts that value upwards, execute the task, and then send the user a link or a PDF or whatever it is for that particular action to give them the end result, right? Now, what's fascinating about agentic AI is that I didn't program, right, which APIs to call based on the request. I'm leveraging the large language model's ability and its ability to sort of reason, if you want to use that term. I'm sure there's some ethical and theological components to really reasoning it out, but whatever you call it, I'm letting it make the decision about what tools to call to accomplish that task. And I might be giving it certain prompts or instructions to try and keep it on the rails, so to speak, so it's not going all over the platform, but it is making its own decisions on how to operate in that system. And it opens up a whole host of fascinating problems, right? As you're designing those systems, what tools do you give it? What tools do you not give it? So case in point, we do not let our AI assistant delete anything. The delete APIs don't exist, right? So it can create whatever it wants, but can't remove anything from the system. Only a human can do that. So we've tried to be thoughtful about how to do that, but that's how the technology sort of works, and then the interesting problems that it sort of creates for us at least.
Yeah, I think some smaller examples of agents too is like anybody that just uses ChatGPT, there are things called GPTs, and it's basically an assistant that you set up that you say, I want you to do this thing, and here's your knowledge for it. And you can restrict it to only do that. So an example would be, we implemented a new HRIS system, and so we have all the documentation on how to navigate that and how we want employees to use it. So this agent, this GPT, will only answer questions about how to operate it based on that documentation we have. So it's very specialized versus a chat, which is wide open. Maybe it's using the underlying model intelligence, or maybe it's using information from the internet. This is very focused on a specific task or set of tasks.
Steve, how about you guys? Have you built anything out custom?
Well, I'd like to note that not only have I now learned how to dress better, but I now know that I use agents, because we do use GPTs from some pretty standard structures that are consistent within at least a couple of our news organizations now. We also use within our content management system, where we have all our stories we publish to our website. We have I'm going to call it, a plugin, because that's what we term it as. But it's a plugin that analyzes the text and delivers things like appropriate headlines that'll make it more discoverable on search, on social media, and help us write excerpts, right? That'll again allow people to have a better sense of the story and read the story. We don't use anything to actually write the story. We use it only for that secondary type of information.
Yeah. I will just mention, on the probably super simple scale, but super useful, we use both projects and custom GPTs. But the projects within ChatGPT are really effective if so we have personal paid accounts for a number of staffers, including sales. And for those salespeople, we help them build out a project where we've uploaded all of their media kits and examples of all the publications and examples of their correspondence with clients as writing samples. And so if you open that up, you can say, okay, I need to make a proposal for somebody. Here's the gist of it. And I love to do all this audio. You just talk to it, and it'll spit out an incredibly well composed first draft of a sales proposal, for example.
Yeah, oftentimes in a presentation.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that's like, I think that's one of the interesting things to get at is like, some of it's not a super complicated tech stack to get to. It's just like, even just how the tool works inherently, but that everybody unless they have the room to play with it, maybe don't get to that point.
And I'll also add, when you add presentations in there, what you get back is often much nicer than you would create yourself. Just because it brings in design elements that you may not be aware of. It just can not only streamline the process, and I think that's, to me, some of the takeaways I'm starting to get is not only does it streamline the process, there's actually a place where it can actually make it better. Yeah. Right. And that's what we're always trying to find. We're not just replacing something, we're trying to enhance it.
Yeah, I think there's two other major benefits to using some type of agent is that you just reduce the risk of bias and hallucinations. It's not zero. You still need to review output always, but when you're giving it a very focused set of information to work with, then in some cases you can say only use this, and you can feel better about the output that you're getting.
So you that point about bias and hallucinations is a perfect lead into what I wanted to ask about next, which is consistency. AI doesn't calculate, it predicts. And so the result that you get is not the same every time. How do you in your organization deal with the fact that what you get might not be the same every time, or that sometimes models change. And obviously, if you've got a policy that says we're using this model until we've tested the next one, that's not an issue. But generally, like when ChatGPT 4 went to GPT 5, things that you built in 4 sometimes didn't work anymore. We have some examples of that in our organization. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off there. Like, obviously, traditional software engineering, we're used to designing systems and then you test them and they execute every time. And when it does exactly what you want, you ship to production, you're done, right? AI, like you mentioned, doesn't work that way. What I would say is, not to turn a weakness into a strength, like let's lean into it, but because AI is inherently, has this stochastic element, it'll do the same thing 3 or 4 different times. That is an incredible opportunity to actually allow it to self-discover how to do things efficiently. So what do I mean by that? So we've also built internally our own computer use agent. So everything I talked about an agent, but instead of giving it, APIs in a system, you give it a mouse, a keyboard, screenshot tool of a particular desktop, and then you give it a task and you let it go execute, right? If I give it a task that says, hey, I want you to log into to this, web page and download this model and attach to an email and send it off to HR for processing or whatever, right? It'll do that same thing 10 different ways. Like one time it'll write its own code to launch a browser. Another time it'll move the mouse and like click and launch the browser. And a third time it might, go to the start menu and type in Chrome and launch a browser. Each one of those is a little faster or a little slower of a way to execute that task. But if I just let it try 10 different ways of doing the same thing, I now have 10 different modes of sequencing that I can monitor and then tailor my prompt to be like, actually, the exact way I want you to do it based on how I watched you do this before is write the code. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's more accurate, right? So to a certain extent, yes, it is disadvantageous when we're trying to automate tasks that have a right and wrong answer, but it's extremely advantageous when we want to just start with something general, see how it performs, identify what's most optimal, and then lock in on that sort of one. So it's both a strength and a weakness, I think, that you need to manage appropriately and figure out how do you design the AI towards the strengths when you want to leverage that ability to sort of operate differently, and then tailor and refine it and use your guardrails to keep it really tight when you don't want that kind of behavior. So it's both a strength and a weakness from the technology.
Yeah, I'd say too, and kind of building off of what you were saying, over the last 12, 18 months, a lot of the models won't actually calculate anything themselves. They know the formulas and then they'll write a little program and have the program give you the mathematical results. So that helps. But we're talking a lot about ChatGPT, but a lot of these features are available in various platforms. And with projects or GPTs, there are areas where you can put instructions in, and to get more consistency, you just refine those instructions to get more and more closer to what you actually want for output. So I'm constantly kind of iterating over those. You can even go into your settings and say, like, whenever you answer any questions for me, I want you to consider these things, or I want you to be honest if you can't be more than 70% sure. Like, there's little tweaks that you can do to the settings that you can ensure more clear answers.
Yeah, I think I tend to treat it almost like when you're reporting, right? There's a certain level of skepticism. You just don't take things at face value. You have to be willing to follow back up. I do that a lot. I mean, you could almost say I argue with it sometimes where it doesn't do. It's like, this isn't right. Try it again. Going back and, repeating the key, like, do not add information that is not in this body of text. Take things verbatim. Do not alter a quote. And ChatGPT, I've found, wants to fill in the blanks more than others. I've been playing around with Gemini, but it really likes to please you in a weird way. It's like, oh, great. Oh, sorry, I messed that up. Let me try again. And then it does the same thing. Gemini, I got to say, in the last week, it actually gets there in far less. Maybe we're in the honeymoon stage. I don't know, but it just gets there faster and doesn't make stuff up. And also, when I'm using it, I tend to have it look at small things. Like, I give it very specific directions and maybe drop in something, a body of text, and be like, only look at that. I do not want it to go and pull from the sky different elements to give it context.
And is that like that, those observations that you just gave, is that, how do you get those out from you and the experiments that you're doing out to your teams across, 7 newsrooms, right?
It's a challenge because first you have to really be interested in it, right? You have to see it for its potential value, right? So I tend to head into it being like, wow, this is a cool tool, so I want to use it. I see other people that are maybe legitimately more skeptical, right? I'm not going to say they're wrong, right? And they treat it differently. And I think both are okay for now. Eventually, you got to start playing around with it because it does have the ability to make you more capable. And that's all we're looking for, is becoming more capable to do things that we otherwise wouldn't do. But yeah, getting people to adapt is always a challenge because you're getting them to spend time, invest time so that they can save time. That's a tough argument to make sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that feels to me like a leadership challenge, and I'll bring that to you, Chris and Leo. How important is it for leadership to not only be supporting AI experiments, but to be in them, to understand it in a way that, well, won't belabor it. How important is that?
Yeah, so at Mainstay, our founder Ryan Barton, he was all in like right away. What is it, late 2022 when ChatGPT was really catching fire at 3.5, and it started really actually with our leadership team creating GPTs and getting in there and collaborating together and seeing the possibilities of what we could do for our team to make things more efficient and more enjoyable. So it's kind of started there, and then a governance committee, a cross-functional committee across teams to just talk about like those tips and tricks on how you can use it more effectively. And I think a lot of the talk around agents, the push towards agents, is to help with some of that consistency too. It's like that's a little bit of a barrier to adoption in less collaborative situations, where if you can build agents that do things more consistently and share those with the team to use, then you don't have to worry about too much of that.
Yeah, I think you need executive buy-in for any sort of major change management effort. AI is no different from that. I think one of the things that we've noticed with AI in particular in driving adoption is a lot of times you're asking employees to do something that maybe would take them 5 minutes, but instead invest 15 to 20 minutes to figure out how to have AI do it for them or do most of it for them. And from a Excel sheet executive perspective, like, yeah, if everybody does this, it's great because we just gain all this time back. But when you think about an actual person's day, you're asking them to take what would be a 5-minute task and instead spend 20, 30 minutes on it. They would have spent that 20, 30 minutes on some other element of their day. We, as an executive team, are constantly figuring out, like, how do we either create that time by creating dedicated teams that can kind of parachute in to do that work for that person, carve out more time in their day to allow for that kind of stuff, get stuff off people's plates. Because if your expectation is that I'm going to give everyone, ChatGPT Pro, and then, efficiencies will rain down from on, like, that's not how it works, right? It's like any technology like that. So I think that executive buy-in is critical. Having that leadership idea is critical. And then I think, Cam talked about this before, and we talk about this a lot internally. A lot of tools that make us more efficient, they don't immediately lead to cost savings or reductions in headcount because it's just not the way technology works. And I give the example all the time of, we use Slack. It makes everybody more efficient. I don't think we fired anybody when we implemented Slack, and I don't think we ever would, right? But I also know that if I took it away, I'd have a riot on my hands, right? Because everybody loves that tool because it makes them more efficient. AI is very similar in a lot of ways like that, right? It's the same thing for the coding co-pilots, it's the same thing for other things. It makes people better at their jobs. We get more output. It makes us more efficient, but it doesn't necessarily lead to any sort of immediate cost reductions. And if your ROI calculations are assuming that, those things are going to look like failures when they are absolutely not. Right? They are absolutely adding value. You're just looking at the wrong place. You're looking at the denominator, the amount of time spent, and if you're getting enough of that out, you're not looking at the numerator, the amount of output you're getting in that efficiency calculation. I think we need to be focused all the time on the numerator part of the efficiency equation. How much output are we getting? And if we're getting more output over and above our investment, that justifies what AI is doing for us, not necessarily just the cost takeout component.
I think that's a great point too, on why a lot of pilots fail is businesses might dole out tools or say this is okay to use it and be more efficient without thinking about just someone's day to day, and they can't see the forest for the trees, and they don't really have time to even think like at a larger scale of like, how could this improve my day?
How, did you want to?
No, you got it.
Well, I was gonna, you mentioned it may be a more sensitive topic, which is, the creation of efficiency leads to potentially elimination of jobs, right? Or changing of how the workforce is configured, right? And one of the things I think we're seeing, there hasn't been, a total decimation of jobs at this point, but we are seeing an impact on entry-level jobs. And one of the questions that I think is really important is if entry-level jobs in various fields, whether it's programming technology, whether it's in writing, how do you get senior level people eventually? And I throw that out as maybe the beginning to dabble into the ethics questions here. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, I look at, my own kids. I have one in college and one on the cusp. So they're kind of trying to look at how this is going to shake out, and how they're going to, get a foothold in this changing world. And here I am on the other side using AI in a totally different way that's applying everything I've learned. So there is this valley of knowledge that we're going to have to fill. Because when I look at, I said I'm an early adopter because I see the value in it because I can apply it to all the things I've done and feel like I have confidence in what I'm trying to achieve. And now here's a way to do it quicker. Great, I'm sold. But somebody who is earlier in their career or trying to figure out what their career is, they may see it differently. And I think that's legitimate. I think maybe I would see it differently if I was just starting out, trying to understand, okay, how am I going to apply this great tool to something I don't really fully understand yet myself? We're going to have to figure that out because that is, as you mentioned, that's the continuum. That's the people that are going to be leading us to the next stage. And the best I can come up with is whatever you do, and this is what I've told both of my kids, is like implement it into what you're doing. Because I think the leadership in whatever you do is going to have to include some level of comfort with AI.
Yeah, I think that valley too is filled with worthwhile work that's good for building skills and wrestling with and, being creative, learning how to write, learning how to code. But there's also a bunch of stuff in that valley that we filled with just administrative, mess. And we actually had this question at our all staff meeting yesterday of like, we talked about automating certain tasks in our network operations center. And the technician there was like, well, how is anybody going to build skills to do these things? I'm like, well, there's no shortage of problems that we need to solve. I mean, I've been in IT for over 25 years now, and it's just the problems are changing. It's just kind of shifting. So I see plenty of opportunity in the future for folks. It's just going to be what are the things that we need to learn now to move forward.
I think at least at Vestmark we grapple with this a lot too. On the one hand, it's easy to say, look, we don't need as many junior entry-level software engineers because we can get that same amount of output through the coding tools. There is a lot of concerns around like, well, then how do you create the senior developers? And I think it'll take time for companies to adapt and adjust, but we've seen this with other technologies. What you do is you just increase the expectations on your junior employees. Like, I think that's what's going to happen, right? So instead of, you write the code and then you become more senior, you become the code reviewer. All right, well, how do we get our entry-level people to be the code reviewers, right? Like that's really what we need them to do. So the expectations go up, right, for what those entry-level jobs can do. And you need to start to shift and adjust your mindset as a company, as an organization about how you're going to adopt that. And I would, and then for other areas where it is more maybe a direct automation, like we used to have somebody do this task, now AI can do it. We don't have another task for them to do. I think that's going to be a broader societal sort of ethical question, if we don't tee that one up of, I tend to think like the most precious asset we have as human beings is our time. I don't think it's necessarily ethical to ask somebody to do something that we've invented technology can do for us, right? Like if we banned tractors and forced everyone to farm because it eliminated jobs, like is that ethical? I don't know. I'm not an ethicist, but I'd say like that doesn't feel right. I think we're going to start to see that in a lot of other places across, our sort of economy and how we adjust to that. But just saying that we should be afraid of this technology or ban it because it's going to have impacts on jobs is very, I think, short-sighted because it doesn't take into account, as the other panelists here mentioned, right? Like, what else could we do at that time? We can do more and better things with it. It's just going to be incumbent upon us to find out what those things are and apply it.
That's a great answer, and optimistic. I love it. I want to take a couple minutes now and open this up if anybody in the audience would like to ask our panelists some questions, and then shortly we're going to move into roundtable discussions where everybody gets to talk anyway. So we have a question.
Thank you. This is kind of, we were talking about this. We're on this table, well, part of our table is from the Career Development Center at Saint Anselm College. So this is something that's top of our mind. So if you don't mind me kind of jumping onto this question to extend it a little bit, thinking of the shameless plug for our students and a liberal arts education, thinking about, I've been writing down thoughtful leadership, problem solving, problem finding, thinking about all of these different curiosity. These are things that are hallmarks of a liberal arts education. And I think kind of if you're maybe to kind of stretch the question a little bit of what are those connection points? So if we're already giving our students all of these opportunities to learn this and thinking about other people in this room who may be kind of jumping into AI and learning more about it, what are some of the things that you've found helpful to be able to adopt some of these technologies, that might be kind of practical advice? Thank you.
So I'll jump in. Practical advice is, the technology and the efficiency and all of that is going to be important. But at the end of the day, I think it's about being people. And I think the biggest skill going forward is the ability to make connections, create groups, to talk to each other. I think that's going to become valued more than ever. And that's what I see even for my own industry and my own company is that they're going to hopefully increasingly value the humanness, the peopleness that we can bring in spite of wherever technology takes us.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, one of the things I would say to especially like entry-level people coming out of college is, what's different now that wasn't true 4 or 5 years ago is like every single person in this room, every single person at this college, at every college has access in their pockets on their phone to one of the greatest software engineers anywhere on the planet. Every single person at a cost of like $20 a month, right? That is a radical change in the barrier to entry to start to create applications to solve real world problems. It used to be you would need to go and find, you either needed to study software engineering, get practical experience, go out and raise a boatload of capital, which is never fun or easy to do. And then maybe you got a chance to get into like an incubator and build this application. Now, you can build an MVP product and get it into the hands of a user to get feedback within a weekend, right? On very narrow problems, right? That is a crazy opportunity for entry-level people to start tackling those problems, right? And it's really exciting. So I think it's a little bit of a mindset shift as society. Like it'll take us a while to start to adapt our structures in that sort of way. That's in the technology space, but even broader than that, like in the humanities, like everyone's got a great editor, right, that they have access to. Everyone's got an AI that they can bat ideas off of and get feedback on, a researcher assistant, right? Like we all have these things in our pockets right now, right, and on our desktops. The question is like, how are we going to use them to create value in society? I think a liberal arts education structures everyone in a fantastic way. Like you mentioned, problem identification. Yeah, like that's where we're going to be creating value as human beings for the next, 100 years, the same way it's been before, right? Finding the problems and then using the technology to apply them. That's going to be the best thing that we can focus on. Everyone, I'm sure at this college is getting that skills and experience. That's going to be really valuable. So.
Yeah, when recruiting at Mainstay, we're always looking for folks that are curious and experiment with technology, but as long as they have that and then have some experience with that relationship side communication, customer service, like that's actually more important coming into Mainstay in an entry level role than, how many years have you been coding or anything to that degree. It's like, can you relate to people? Have you been in, some type of stressful or conflict situation with a customer, a client, another person that you've had to work through? So, kind of leaning on some of those skills, getting up and speaking in front of the people, public speaking as well. It's like, I think it's going to push a lot of people to work on skills that we haven't had to in quite a while, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't resist adding one in, even though I'm not a panelist. But I do have kids in college and high school and just out of college, and I hear about their experiences with large language models and their classmates. Classmates are turning in papers where it literally says at the bottom, "I can expand on this for you if you'd like." And and they resist using these tools, but I think that these are the best learning tools that we've ever had if we use them to help us think better, not think for us. And so instead of when I was hiring for roles in the digital group, the digital media group for media companies, we were inventing things every day. That's what we had to do. It was our job. The most important question that I asked in a job interview, and it really could have been the only question, was, what was the last thing you taught yourself? Can you teach it to me? And if they didn't have an answer, they weren't right for our group. But I think right now, this tool enables them to teach themselves pretty much everything if they say, teach me how to think, not think for me. Jeff, you had a question.
So I just sold my company. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I've had 40 interns out of Southern New Hampshire. I've had, a lot of students come through, and then I gave a talk about 4 or 5 months ago at Manchester Community College. I had a kid in the audience that said, "Mr. Stutzman, is it true I'm going to make $100,000 when I leave here?" And I said, "Well, let me give you the facts." And I kind of walked them through the thinking. They wanted $100,000 a year. And I said, "Just do the math. How much is that per month?" And nobody could do the math, right? It's $8,333. If you're an entrepreneur, you know. And I said, "And you're going to come and want every holiday off, and you're not going to get your certifications, and you're going to want me to call you they, and I don't even know what that means." And so I said, right now I can go out and hire a GPT, or I can hire somebody overseas very quickly that's going to ask me for $2,000 a month and get everything done. My point here is that these kids coming out of college, there's a lot of competition that they're not ready for. AI is a power tool. It's like learning to use a circular saw. And my expectation is that any kid coming out of college better know how to use the tools. And they better know how to think, because the dumb ones are not going to survive. They're not going to keep up in my organization. There's a guy here that used to work with me, and he'll tell you flat out, the dumb people don't stay very long. And if you don't know how to use the power tools, you don't make it. My expectation of kids coming out of college is that they come ready to work and they know the tools, current and past.
Very gentle comments there, Jeff. Nicely done. Yeah.
Hi. I was fortunate to grow up in a household where the mantra was using technology as a competitive advantage. My dad was a DP manager. He worked for AIG, did stuff with Wang, did stuff for Microsoft. And so I always kind of grew up in this technological environment. We were the first house in my neighborhood. We didn't have a VCR, but we had a desktop computer. It was massive, took up half the kitchen table. My question is, can you delineate between this common phrase, this common label of AI, which in my opinion, what I've heard all today is simply a new tool to do things more efficiently, just like the desktop, the Cray, the calculator, the abacus over time. People thought these things were magic. And what we're hearing out there in the larger sphere of AI, meaning independent thinking outside of human interaction, and not just thinking, but decision making. This is not like a theory. The people who are running these companies are talking about general AI being, people aren't going to be involved with the decisions. So can you delineate tool for efficiency versus we're not going to be making the decisions?
That's an easy one. Any one of you guys just grab that?
I'll
I'm kidding. It's not easy.
Maybe I'll start. I think one of the things I think that's different about AI, because there's things that are very similar to other sorts of technologies, and there are things that are different. And the thing that is fundamentally different about AI, especially the way we've been talking about the agents, is agency. Like, we are going to allow this technology to make decisions in ways that we really didn't with technology before. I think it's still incumbent upon us as a society, as companies, as leaders within companies, to decide what decisions are okay or not okay. Not all that dissimilar to how we structure ourselves. It's going to get a little philosophical, but like, we structure our own societies in that way too, right? Like, if you're the CEO of a company, you don't make every decision in that company, right? Like, the whole reason you have employees and layers is because you want to push autonomy down into the system where those decisions are best made, right? And then if you structure it right, the best decisions bubble up, and if you get that wrong, your company probably goes out of business, right? And there are certain decisions that you don't let people make at all, right? Because they violate the law, and you have councils in places to avoid that. I think AI is going to operate within our society, within our companies, within our structures in a very similar way, right? We're going to have to understand where are we okay with it making decisions versus where do we want that human oversight to not allow it to make certain decisions. But I do think, unlike other technology, I think it was IBM or somebody said something like a computer should never be allowed to make a decision because it can't be held accountable. I think we're at a place now where we're saying, like, no, we are okay with computers making some decisions because they're either better, they're more accurate, they're faster, safer, right? Like, we think about, like, we talked a little bit before about self-driving cars. I think there was a study that came out that said self-driving cars are objectively in a lot of places safer than human beings. Not in every place, right? Not in every scenario, but writ large, like, yeah, a car that drives itself is going to drive safer than a human being, doesn't get drunk, all those other sorts of problems. So as a society, we're going to have to be okay with the machines we've created starting to make certain decisions. But I think Cam said, like, we're also going to need to make sure that we're putting guardrails in place on what decisions are okay and not okay. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's a little bit different about the technology. Maybe I didn't. All right.
I'll give a quick example of making decisions, because the technology exists now where you could log into a website and it knows a lot about you and it can deliver the content that it thinks you want to see and everyone's happy. But you kind of have to know your value proposition, which is that we're people helping guide you through a complex world. And there's some value in someone that's actually spending time creating a hierarchy of news. And, that's another way to look at it is, what are you willing to cede? And in that case, to me right now, I think that's ceding too much, because I think we hear a lot that people want a product where there is a humanness involved, or here's what I think is important based on the research that I've done and the reporting and the background. So I think there's still value, but you have to understand your own business's value proposition as you're making those decisions.
Yeah, I have a little bit of whiplash myself between the headlines of, we're 6 months to AGI to a large language model is nothing close to AGI, and we're, many years from that. But when it comes to decision making, a lot of the vendors have kind of come to this idea of Copilot, and Microsoft has really, added it to their products as far as naming. But like, the agent or the AI can take you to a certain point, and then that human in the loop has to be the final evaluation of what it has done and the decision maker. Cam was talking earlier about a use case within HR, or just like it being used from an HR standpoint for hiring. So a bad use case would be your AI system and agents are making decisions on who to hire and who not to hire. A good use case might be prepping the HR person on how to ask candidates questions based on the job description and their qualifications that are coming in. So it's up to the businesses and the individuals to say, like, this is the line, and we're not going to cross it and let AI just go all the way. Yeah, that's a great point.
Or even it goes a little beyond that, just to build on that. Like, in our space in wealth management, there's this idea of like the fiduciary standard. And we've asked point blank, and I don't know SEC if there's real strict guidance, but like, can an AI ever be held to a fiduciary standard? Can it operate as a fiduciary? And what that means fundamentally is like you're expected to act in your client's best financial interest, not your own best financial interest, right? Because it's really gray, like the only way we can navigate around that best we can is to say, look, there are decisions that fall under that category, like picking an investment product, that we will not let AI do because we don't believe that it can operate in that fiduciary capacity. We just don't trust it to do that. And so we make the advisor who has that standard or Vestmark in that place, if we do, make that decision, right? So if you ask our AI assistant, what's the best ETF for this client? It won't answer, or it really shouldn't, right? Like we do everything we can to make sure that it cannot answer that question as it crosses that line, right? So we've put those lines in place. Executing a trade, can't do that, right? Because it crosses that line. I think there's gonna be a lot of things like that in society in general we're gonna have to confront. But it's places like that that's live. It's real right now. Like we grapple with that every day. So are we getting it right everywhere? I think I try to, right? But it's a moving target, and it gets harder and harder as these models get more robust and more capable.
That was a great question, I think, to segue us to the roundtable discussions. Well, I can't resist adding one more thing. At the kernel of that question, the other thing I heard was like, is it different, right, than all of those other tools? And I think it fundamentally is. I think this is a paradigm shift, just an opinion. But what makes it so different is all those other tools, we may not understand how they work, but we could understand how they work. This one, we really don't know because it's not built, it's grown. And so even the people making it don't really know why it answers questions the way that it answers them. And you can go into the technology of how it's trained and developed, but no matter how deep you get, there's no real answer there because it's grown.